Okay, so the topic today is the role that advising plays in your teaching and the role that advising plays in undergraduate academic success. And the way that we thought we would talk about this is, I'm going to talk a little bit about the challenges that faculty may feel they face when they approach advising, and some of the tools and the elements that you might gather to help yourself with that. And then we'll have two faculty members talk about their experience and their gains and their obstacles, and then Amy Davignon from the College of Education and Human Development will close it up, explaining how that college's advising program works. I'd like to clarify that I work in the College of Liberal Arts, so the material that I just handed out is sort of a sample of some of the material we've put together to help faculty with advising in our college. So it may not apply fully to other colleges that you are members in. So, whoops, I'm not doing that right. There we go. Okay, so I've divided it a little bit in two parts. The part where you're preparing to see students and preparing to advise, and then the parts when you're actually delivering advising. And I know from working with faculty, I work almost exclusively with faculty advisors, and I know that for some, the idea of being the only source of advising information and guidance can be a little bit intimidating for mainly a couple of reasons. One is that students come with increasingly complex questions about very specific things like policies and procedures and nuances within regulations that may apply only to them or differently to them than to other people. And that's a lot of information for anyone whose job is not primarily to advise to really hold. And the second reason is because students come with increasingly complex personal situations, especially in our institution. And that can be a little overwhelming as well, to know that perhaps that person, that representative of the university is the one point person and the one contact that the student is making an attempt to reach out to. And that's a pretty hefty burden to carry as well. So when you're preparing to advise, I think that there are some things that faculty can equip themselves with, so that they're not alone and they're not doing this in a vacuum. One of them is creating, or the main one is creating collaborations. So there are a number of resources throughout the university that can help anybody, any member of the university community, work with a student who's encountering any kind of difficulty. One of the things that you have in the things I handed out is a referral resource sheet. That is university-wide, and it talks about most, if not all, of the university referral resources. Anything from counseling center to tutoring, with all the college advising, the college-based advising centers in between, campus safety, and the way that it's put together. And it was asked of me by a chair who told me that she was increasingly confused by the number of materials that she got at the beginning of the fall that all said you can refer students here and there, and she couldn't keep track of them, and she wanted a sort of cheat sheet. Started out as one pager, and it became, I think, 2 or 3 pages now, that explains when you can send a student to where and what they will find there. So when is it appropriate to directly call campus security, as opposed to when do you need to instead walk a student over to the counseling center? And these are, it's not that I think you should use that. What I'm proposing is that every college can create that for itself, every advising program, and faculty can ask the college-based centers. One of the things you have in there, except for nursing, I didn't include the nursing one, but the others, the College of Science and Math, Management, Liberal Arts, they're included there. Amy's going to talk about the College of Education and Human Development. And every college now has one with our new initiatives for greater retention and persistence. Every college has some college-based advising division that could help create one of those that's pertinent to you. So those are resources for you and for the student. The other one is to know advising contacts within your college, the names of those people in your college center, the direct telephone lines, people within other departments, liaisons to your college and the University Advising Center. These are things that are readily available, and all those people are professional advisors who are very happy to answer questions or help you when you've got some doubt about how to work with a student. And the final thing is partnering with a student. It's really important to remember that it is mostly the student's responsibility to know his or her degree requirements, to know what the path is, to read his or her degree audit. I always tell the story when I'm working with faculty. I have a friend who I respect very much, who was the chair of a department, who felt very bad because there was a student, an advisee of hers, who she'd been working with for the past 4 semesters, I think, exclusively because in the College of Liberal Arts, students are only, declared majors in liberal arts are only advised by faculty. They are not advised by professional advisors for the most part. And it had slipped by her that he wasn't going to reach 120 credits. She was looking at requirements, and everything looked fine. And he was on a plan to graduate, and she told him, yep, you're good, you're okay. And the student wasn't going to accrue 120 credits, so he declared his intent to graduate. He got a letter from the registrar's office saying, you're not going to graduate in December or May or whenever it was that this was happening. And she felt really, she was upset about it. She blamed herself in great part, and she went to many layers of the university to ask that an exception be made because she wanted to take responsibility for it. And an exception couldn't be made, and the reason was because the student had his degree audit available to him throughout the entire process, and he was more responsible than she was for understanding it and knowing those requirements. And the thing at the top is that 120 credits are required. So it's important to remember that we are partnering with the student, and that means 2 things. 1, that it's not solely our responsibility, but 2, that we need to help the student become an owner of his or her educational process. So this means simple enough things like reinforcing, you need to know this audit. You can't just read it when you come to see me. We will go through it together, and any questions you have to come with them. You have to actively do this. It's a message that needs reinforcing. It's one of the I think our greatest responsibility, more than knowing answers, is knowing to tell the student this and to insist on this and helping the student transition to that position of ownership and accountability and power over what he or she is doing. So that's when that's one part of preparing to advise. Another one is, how do you get them in when you're in? One very common concern / complaint of faculty, at least in my college, is that students do not come the week prior to registration or the first week of registration. They come in at other times, near the end of the semester, in the summer when faculty are not available in a lot of cases. There are a number of things. This is always going to be a work in progress, I think, because of the characteristics of our institution. But there are a number of things that can help and that have helped some departments. And they're just technicalities, really. Email outreach. Yes, the registrar's office sends out an email to all students letting them know when they will be eligible to graduate. But it goes a long way if you individually, as a student's advisor, send out a personalized email to your caseload to say, these are going to be my hours. If they're not going to work for you, let me know. What can we do? Are you going to need someone else? So the email outreach is really important. Some faculty feel comfortable using social media, and by all means, this works very well for people who can. But any of these things is going to vary by department, well, by college first and foremost, then by department and by individual who's using them. All of these things have to be adapted to whatever you're comfortable doing. It can't be a mandate. The other one is appointments. There are some very simple things that some departments have adopted, and the reason that I handed out the slides of the PowerPoint more than for the rest is in case any of you want this. There are 2 free tools, simply book.me and youcanbook.me, where you can create a schedule, a calendar, to send as a link to students, where students can sign up for blocks of time for advising, for instance. There is one department in the College of Liberal Arts who very successfully uses a wiki, where they have sign-up sheets for advising. And I'm sure that departments would be willing to share their resources. Some departments do walk-in days or hours, and they collaborate so that there is someone always staffing that during a period of time. A combination of these things tends to work well. And then another thing is some departments announce in all of their classes, say the Latin American Iberian Studies department, every single professor during a period of time prior to registration will announce every single class at the end as a habit, the Latin American Iberian Studies program is advising during this period in particular, not meaning that they won't be available any other time, but we are devoted to advising. We have this system up in place at this time. This is the way we do it. Of course, there are a lot of students in the class who will not be majors, but they will also be catching a lot of their majors. Okay, and now for the second piece of when you've actually gotten the student in and you are in a session advising. So the way to think about advising as a step to increase student success and thereby increase our persistence and graduation rates is to think holistically about the student. Advising is more than registration advice. Like I said at the beginning, advising is sometimes the only point of contact for students who don't go and seek faculty during faculty hours, and they just go to class and listen. That connection with you might be the only time that they are interacting face-to-face, one-on-one with a faculty member. And there are a lot of things to look at that aren't just what are you going to register for next semester. The first one might be just checking in on classes. How are you doing? And to know that the word fine sometimes really means I hope I'm doing fine. So probing a little bit and asking, well, what have your grades been so far? What has been the feedback? How many quizzes have you had? What's the percentage of the grade? Is helpful, because a lot of things can be prevented. Sometimes you're in time to talk about a possible withdrawal from a class or declaration of pass-fail. If you ask the question in time and the student is able to tell someone, fine, but fine really means I got a 60 in one quiz and a 59 in the next. The other thing is the student needs to be able to understand the whole audit, not just the major piece that is your area of discipline. And this goes back to the beginning of there are lots of resources to help with this. One of the brochure that I handed out is a pretty good guideline of the general education requirements, so the things outside of your discipline, both for BS and for a BA. It differs for nursing and for management, but for College of Science and Math, College of Education and Human Development, College of Liberal Arts, and College of Public and Community Service, those general education requirements apply. And again, it's a guideline. It was created not by my office, but by University Advising Center, by Centralized Advising, and a lot of faculty members find it a nice aid. The other thing to check, does the student have a plan? As we look as a university, as an institution, at trying to help our students complete their degree in a timely manner because it increases their chances of actually completing it, it's important to talk to students about the plan for completion, even if it's long-term. Having it mapped out, talking about it with someone, realizing that perhaps they haven't thought about that can be very helpful. And then finally, knowing your advisees. If you are that point of contact, if you are that only person that he or she connects to outside of class, being able to remember a name or a detail, or maybe if you don't remember, just asking at that moment. And it goes back to holistically, you don't have to ask, necessarily if you're not comfortable, what are your personal interests, but or what is going on in your personal life, but asking, there are ways of going into that have to do with your studies. Do you work as well? How many hours do you work? How do you get to work? So what's that commute like? Is that a good job? Is that a job you want to stay at? Some of these things will help you to get to know your advisee and that person's academic abilities and their situation. How do you do this of knowing your advisees? It's a really good idea if you can to keep some sort of record. And this will look very different for faculty members who have a caseload of 60, and some in my college do, and those who have a caseload of 6. It really will look different, and each way that the person chooses has to be okay. But it would be a good idea to keep records if you can. There are different ways of doing this. It could be as simple as just an advising log, just a list of people that you saw, the date, and if you saw them in person or by email, so that if you can later go check if you're consulted by that same person, or you can know, yeah, that person did come to see me. I did see this person last semester. Another one would be individual records, so not just a log, but maybe a file or notes on individuals. Some departments share. They either have them online or in some kind of shared folder that everybody can access. Some departments actually have physical. Political science, for instance, has tried out physical files that are in the administrative assistant's office, so anybody can get that. So that if 2 people work with one same student, they can go back and see what was done before. Where was that student the last time he or she came in? And then just sort of FYI, for those of you who haven't heard, an information sharing system is already in the works, being used for some things at UMass Boston. It's called MapWorks. You'll hear more about it, but we are moving towards an information sharing system. And then finally, what I wanted to share with you, I wanted to talk to you a little bit, and I hope that you can discuss with, especially with your colleagues, with Reyes and with Bob, some of the things that are to be gained from advising. Because you're giving a lot, but there are a lot of things that you can get that can impact your teaching positively sometimes from advising. And working with a few faculty members, again, these are in College of Liberal Arts, they were kind enough to share a little bit about what they gained from advising, and I wanted to share that video with you because I thought it was useful and it was quite encouraging for me. So let's see if this works. That did not work, did it? Okay. That is a good one.
We got students at this university with fascinating background stories. A lot of first-generation college students, a lot of international students, a lot of people supporting families, working. And it's primarily been through advising when the students come in year after year that I get a little bit more of a sense of who our student body is.
So I have definitely learned. Specifically, it's a good way to put yourself in the shoes of the student and things you might not think about. I was an undergrad a long time ago. So their experience is completely different, and you're also reminded of how they see the world and what they might find interesting, and so it's a way also to learn how to deliver information, but in your classes as well, because things that they might, let's say key phrases or key words that they recognize or they identify, then you can use later on in your classes.
But I think it's helped to give me a better idea of the universe that our students live in. And in that sense, understanding all of the outside things and context and environment that come into their lives that help to understand and portray information in the classroom, but also to understand our students better.
In every interaction and relationship with students over time, both majors and non-majors, I have learned a lot about the lives and concerns of our students. So I feel like it's, personally and professionally been helpful, informative. And it's also been great to connect with people, say for example, in CLA First or in academic advising or academic support services, to find out what other people are doing across the university to support our students.
Okay, so basically to sum up, some of the things that they mentioned were that advising has helped them to understand our student body, realize the students' interests and the view they hold of the world in a way that can inform their teaching and what they do in their classrooms. That it has helped them to understand how to deliver information more effectively so it can be understood by students. That it's helped them to know where our particular students are and therefore be able to better meet them there where they are. And then that it's been professionally formative in that it's helped them to network and get to know what other areas of the university are doing, so to form relationships that are university-wide with the entire community in doing that. So I'm going to invite Reyes and Bob to, would you like to do it together or come
Sure.
one by one? Yeah, to come up, and some of the things that you know, I know that they've considered are the role of faculty advising in their individual departments and in their colleges. Reyes is from liberal arts and Bob is from science and math. The impact it's had on their teaching, and also some of the challenges that they've either had or have needed to overcome and maybe haven't overcome yet that might be interesting for this group to discuss.
I know that when I was first hired, I see Peter here who hired me, and one of the tasks he told me I was going to have to do was do advising. And I had little experience with advising from my previous part-time positions at Northeastern University because that wasn't required of me in that job. So I said, well, okay, I'll do that. And I sort of figured it out once I got here, how to do it. But basically, I think a lot of it's already been covered. It's trying to know your students and know what affects their academic success, how successful they're being, how or why they might be unsuccessful at certain parts of the curriculum, and help guide them into becoming more successful in those aspects. Now, one of the things that it used to be is I think advising used to be more traditionally just let's go through all the requirements and make sure you're meeting them all. But fortunately, we do have WISER, and we have the degree audits now, which takes care of a lot of that and really organizes that well for us. So we can get through that faster. And then we can concentrate on some of the things that are important, like you know, what else is going on in your life, and why is that affecting your academic performance, or how is that helping you have good academic performance? Let's either change some things, or let's keep you know, emphasizing some of these other aspects of their life. So, you know, I mean, advising is in essence, you know, sort of teaching the student to think about their career field. Why are they taking this course? What does this course contribute to their career field? Why would it be important when they are looking for a job to know this kind of material? But then you asked about how does it factor in teaching? Well, occasionally we end up with those, quote, teachable moments that are more advising than they are curriculum-based in our classes. I'll have a student sometimes come up when we're talking about the project that they're working on, and you know, how they have to approach the project and what's involved in the project. And then some of the students will throw their hands up in the air. Well, so that's too difficult for me to learn, or that's too difficult for me to do. Why are you asking something so hard in a project? And you know, then it gives me an opportunity to, you know, give a few life lessons, so to speak. And one of the life lessons I actually use is one from the swimming team in high school. I had been living on a lake, and I was a great swimmer, and when I got to high school, I said, oh, it'd be natural for me to join the swimming team. I should join the swimming team. So I went in to the tryouts, and the only stroke I knew was the, you know, overhand crawl, which is called freestyle. And when I looked at how many other people there were that were going out for the freestyle, I said, wait a minute, everybody's going out for the freestyle. And some of them were big monsters who were far more athletic than me and could outswim me very easily in the freestyle. And so I didn't make the team the first year I went out, and I'm crushed. I said, well, gee, I've been swimming all my life. I couldn't make the swimming team. Well, that summer I went to an extra camp, and I went to you know, a coached swimming session, and the coach decided to teach me how to swim the butterfly and the backstroke. So the next fall I went out for the swimming team, and naturally on that side of the pool there were all the people, about a dozen or 2 dozen people, trying out for the freestyle events. Over here on this side of the pool, there were 2 or 3 trying out for the backstroke. And when the coach called for butterfly, I was the only one who raised my hand. So I made the team. So what I'm trying to teach the students with that little teachable moment is it isn't all of the things we're teaching in this class that are worth it. It's the difficult things we're teaching you in this class that are worth learning, because those are the ones that will differentiate you from your peers when you're going out and trying to build a career in this field. And so it's very easy to then segue that in later a actual career development opportunity that I took. I was in the Air Force, and I was in the military industrial complex part of the Air Force, so I was dealing with external vendors who were suppliers to the Air Force. And at one point we had a contract where we were having a computer system delivered, and we were going to have the contractor delivering the computer system. They were going to teach the maintenance contractor how to program, and it was going to be all assembly language programming. Well, I'd never had any assembly language programming. It's very difficult. Assembly language programming is difficult. I had done a little bit of programming in Fortran. But I mean, the whole point was, I said to myself, I want to go to that class. So what did I do to my boss? I went into my boss, and I'm teaching Peter that I know how to do these kinds of things, I guess. I went into my boss and I said, well, you know, you got one contractor delivering a course to another contractor. Don't you think somebody from the Air Force ought to attend and make sure they do a good job? And he says, oh, Bob, that's a good idea. I think you ought to do that. So I went for 2 weeks. What I learned was Honeywell 516 assembly language programming. About a year later, I'm getting out of the Air Force. I write this nice letter to Honeywell saying, I know their Honeywell 516 assembly language. Are they interested in hiring me? And of course they were. So, I mean, you can say, what was worth learning? Something very difficult. There were very few people who could do Honeywell assembly language programming on that caliber of machine, and this division that I joined needed that very badly. So it's the things that are hard to learn, and that's what our students need to be getting motivated about. So the traditional business of just making sure that they're making progress on the curriculum is not quite enough. You really have to sort of provide some overview of where they're going, why they're going that way, and some motivation to continue doing what they're doing in the curriculum, because it will have value to them in the long run. So to a certain extent, you have to factor that into your teaching every once in a while. And I usually will take an opportunity like that if it happens to come up from a student question or a student complaint. We will then address that issue, and I might address it in front of the entire class, because I feel it's a teachable moment for everybody, not just the person who asked the question or had the complaint. Obviously, we do anything more personal in private with the student during an advising session if it's not of general applicability to the entire class. The other thing that I found that was probably one of the most difficult things, at least for me, because one of my jobs specifically within the department is evaluating transfer credit. Did this course really teach, what we required to be learned in our course here? And if so, is it really equivalent? Or if it really isn't equivalent, could it be accepted as an exception because it's close enough? And there's an awful lot of judgment calls that you need to learn there. You need to learn some things about the quality in some of the other schools, particularly some of our typical feeder schools. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. You kind of have to know that. And I have learned that by observing how some of our students have done when they've transferred a course here and how they do, and then I can go back to them and I can tell them quite honestly, I know you think that course, prepared you to take the course next to this one. Guess what? I know it didn't. You really do need to retake CS 110 rather than go into CS 210. And I have, a good rationale to explain why, because I can tell them what I know that course didn't cover, for example, even though theoretically they think it did. And so, you know, that was a difficult part of advising, was to properly advise students on transfer credit. And I try to use the judgment call that gets them in where they belong to be able to succeed, rather than too far below where they had reached, because then that just demotivates them if they're saying, I already took all this, I didn't need to do this, versus, oh my gosh, I got placed too high, I'm in over my head, I don't know how to do this, I didn't have sufficient preparation. So there is a bit of a judgment call in figuring out whether a particular course should be given equivalency, shouldn't be given equivalency, and that's what I found probably a very challenging part of advising in my particular role. Now, not all of the faculty members in our department have to deal with that. Those issues generally get referred to me by the other advisors in the department. I'm not sure what else there is, and you know, let another person speak, and then we can answer questions, I guess.
And then yeah.
See? Okay. So my name is Reyes, and I teach in the Department of Latin American and Iberian Studies in Liberal Arts. I have been here for 20 years this month. And I arrived here from graduate school. And I had arrived in graduate school directly from my country to do a PhD. So I had no undergraduate experience or master's experience in this country. I went through my PhD quite fast and landed here the month before I defended my dissertation and began teaching and continued my research. And at the time, I had as little information and knowledge about undergraduate education at UMass Boston as my students, and could not provide any advice or guidance, not only about the major, about anything. I didn't know what general education was. No such things exist in Europe. And there were no services to train faculty of any kind at the time. So I've learned about advising the same way I learned English on my own, which means I am aware that I have a lot of deficiencies. I get by, I've learned, I've survived. Occasionally I do well, but I am taking notes as the advisors teach. So those of you who are new are very, very lucky that we now are starting to put up a very serious system of advising students. And so those of you who are arriving now and are new faculty now will become good advisors very, very fast. It took me a long time. And I am not very, very sure that I can help all students as much as I could if I knew more. They wanted me to talk a little bit about the role of faculty advising in my department. And I can tell that I don't know if this is unusual, but it is not going to be unusual in the years to come. Advising is part of our evaluation of teaching, for fourth year review, for tenure, for renewal of contract, and for merit reviews. Therefore, if there is a professor, a faculty member who doesn't advise, or whose advisees report poor advising or something of the kind, that affects the evaluation of that colleague profoundly. We see, collectively, the department sees the role of advising as comprising recruitment of majors, retention of majors, and success in graduating majors. So each of us is assigned a number of advisees by the chair, randomly, not always. Sometimes if a student has a special interest in translation or teaching or something, they are given to a specific faculty member. And we keep central files, so we can tell when the advisor met with the student, what exactly the advisor recommended, and if the student did not follow the recommendation, at the time of graduation, all those things are taken into account. How has advising impacted my teaching? Well, after years of observing in my interactions with students, some of the questions they had, some of the trouble they had, some of the interest they had, I began in my classes, I teach a very arcane subject, 16th century Spanish literature and history. And I began including in the courses that I taught pieces of that information, from how to read the syllabus and interpret it correctly to what is intellectual inquiry, or how do we know what we know, or why learning how to analyze anything would be a very important skill in order for us to improve our chances to find a better job or perform our job better. And then, the list was so long that I decided I was going to make a course and include everything. So now the major has one course that is the beginning of the major, where students who are entering the major study everything in practical and conceptual terms that has to do with knowledge. And it deals with things such as how to interpret instructions given by a teacher for a paper or an exam, or how to find a research topic in any field, how to evaluate sources, why societies need professional researchers in what fields at what times, why knowledge in certain fields matters more than others at certain times, et cetera, including very practical advice that I'm not going to go into because I think that you might be interested in talking about something else. So that's a clear impact. I teach a course because I learned from my students that there was something major missing, that they couldn't put all these pieces together, although they were trying, and that maybe my department agreed that we could try it. We tried once and it was a very, very big success. It's always over-enrolled, and it's always a pleasure for me teaching it. What are the challenges I have to overcome? The students' expectations and preconceived ideas. Things are easy. Things should be completely flexible, that they consume education. They are used to, like us, to consume products. And they think that they can go through education the same way they can go through a movie or any other product. It has to take whatever it needs, anything, because he needs to get, or she, 12 credits or 11 credits, or, So it becomes a matter of what? Not even choice, it's just, it's random. And so maybe the student might be taking a 400 course somewhere because somebody in the 400 level course doesn't have enough students. And it doesn't matter then that the student is just entering the university and is going to fail at the 400 level. Sorry that you're taping this, but this is going on. Try not to show my dean. Students' work schedule and family obligations sometimes are an obstacle for me, and I find that somebody can only come to the university Tuesdays and Thursdays. Well, it's very difficult to make a coherent program of study with that kind of constraint, or can only come at night, or can only come from 2 to 6, or from 2 to 4. Also, there seems to be, I know this is changing, but there is a general kind of misunderstanding regarding Latin American and Iberian studies, and so colleagues, not from my department, colleagues from other departments and advisors from other colleges would advise a student whose heritage language is Spanish, which means their first language is not Spanish, it's English, but they know how to speak Spanish because they hear it at home. They would advise this, well, Spanish is easy. Take that 400 level course, the student fails. A 400 level course in Latin American studies is not for somebody who has not learned the language incredibly well as many other things that need to be learned before you take an anthropology course offered in Spanish. So those presumptions that I don't think that these colleagues or these advisors would send somebody and pretend that they know enough of psychology or mathematics or to place the students on their own, but it happens. And, that's an obstacle I face, and it makes me very mad and frustrated, as you can tell. And then the last obstacle is my own. I learn it on my own, you know. And when you are self-taught, you don't know what you don't know very well. So I need to. I need more help. I need more instruction, like we're getting here today, to understand how to advise my students. And that's all. That's all. That's all.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you.
Very quick PowerPoint. So my name is Amy Davignon. I'm the director of the Student Service Center for the College of Education and Human Development. I'm here to talk about our advising system, which is somewhat different from liberal arts. Our center, and when it comes up I'll show you, but our center is completely focused on the student and aiding the student in navigating the university. And trying to put this stuff in. So what we do is we work with students for the College of Education. How do we make that big? Okay, and then just pass the, So, Lisa, you're right, you don't. Okay. So our center is basically a center within the College of Education and Human Development. It's focused on assessing and working with students as they navigate through the university. We work with students from recruitment. We work with them to help them with the admissions processes. We offer them general programmatic advising, and we offer MTEL, which is our state teacher examinations. We offer support for students who are starting to become teachers and pursuing licensure, or school psychologists, or school guidance counselors, or principals. And we provide that information. Students who are enrolled in the College of Education, either at the undergraduate level, we have one minor. We also have several programs of study that lead to licensure and other certifications. Or graduate students, they are endorsed through our office for their particular state licenses. As a result, we answer a lot of questions about that. Our recruitment and admission procedures are to basically provide information for undergraduate students who are looking to teach, graduate students who are looking to come into the college, or people who are looking to make a career change. We meet with prospective students. We talk to them about the admissions processes. And we answer whatever questions they may have about our programs. We'll sit with students and go through the course of studies, the courses that they would need. And we also assist students in registering for their courses. We do a lot of this so that the faculty can meet with students on a subject-specific level and sort of have that time with them to talk about how they're going to, for example, teach math. I'm going to say math, but how are they going to teach elementary school? How are they going to obtain an English as a second language license or something? So we like to sort of handle the general aspects. And so one of the other things we do is we are the conduit towards university policies and procedures for the students. Again, a lot of our students are here in the evening, and they're not here, for example, perhaps when the one-stop is open. Our undergraduate students are also here many times in the evening. So a lot of the services that they may receive typically at the one-stop, we also help provide. We provide forms, registration forms, program change forms, transfer credits. We have someone in the office who loves transfer credit approvals. I don't understand it, but it's just something he gets giddy. So, and you might want to call him. He really does like this. But we also handle the transfer credit information. We work with matriculated and non-matriculated students in registration. Oftentimes students, graduate or undergraduate, will take courses simply because they fit into their schedules, but they may not be the appropriate courses for them to take at this point in time. So we counsel those students. We talk to them about, yes, I know this methods class will fit into your schedule, but you don't know about education yet, so it's not going to help you. And we sort of help them see a progression. We map out progressions with students, working with their degree audits, or with graduate students working with the programs. And so, literally say, okay, here's this semester, let's sketch out maybe next semester, where are we going to be next year, 2 years from now. We assist them in demystifying the Massachusetts licensure regulations, because those are amazing, to look at. So we try to make them understandable for anyone whose head doesn't spin when we look at them. And we also provide information about scholarships. Many of our students, as we know, the undergraduates work, graduate students work. They're supporting themselves and they're making their education a priority. And they're very much invested into it. So one of the things our office does to support them is search out scholarship opportunities for them. Denise and I, we are the scholarship committee, and we will meet to talk about students, to check in and check up with students to see where we can help them. Oh, that was the end of this. But one of the things that really drives interacting and advising students, interacting with and advising students in our office is we need to, and we always do, try to remember that what we say 1,000 times, it seems, a week, our students are hearing it perhaps for the first time. And their reaction is no less important if it's the first person I've told somebody, told something to, than if it's the 100th. Students come in for advising, sometimes they're anxious because this is a big university, and sometimes they look at their degree audit and they know they have to do things and they have a schedule, and we hear this and try to really work with each student on an individual level. It takes a lot of memorizing of which student is whom. We keep notes, we save emails. But the reward is when they come back, when the undergraduates come back to go to graduate school, or when the graduate students come back to mentor undergraduates. There are students that we've been in touch with for 6, 7, 8 years. And I truly believe that it's forging that relationship. They know that we're here to help them succeed. So it's a different model in some ways, and perhaps because our college, the numbers are different. But it so far has worked for us, and it's an exciting place to be.